My father faked having cancer, made me sell my apartment, and stole $80,000 to renovate his mistress's house. 5 years later, he called me asking for help again. I went there and told his wife everything in front of the entire family. I was standing completely paralyzed, frozen like a cold marble statue in the impeccably white and antiseptically lit corridor of the private oncology hospital, holding with uncontrollably trembling hands the official manila envelope containing bank documents proving the electronic transfer of $80,000 made exactly 48 hours ago to my father's checking account, while the receptionist repeated methodically, patiently for the third consecutive time with a professional but gently confused voice, the devastating, impossible, incomprehensible phrase that was systematically destroying every certainty I had carefully built about my family life during 37 years of existence. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Beatrice, but we have extensively checked our complete system 3 consecutive times, and I can definitively confirm that there is no record, no history, no evidence whatsoever of a patient named Henry Augustus Ferreira ever having been treated, consulted, examined, or admitted to this hospital institution during the last 5 complete years of electronically accessible, digitized medical records. My exhausted brain, stubbornly, obstinately, desperately refused to adequately process, logically comprehend, emotionally accept the devastating meaning of those professionally articulated words, because processing them would mean admitting, recognizing, confronting the monstrous, unthinkable, unbelievable truth that my own father, the man who supposedly taught me fundamental ethical values during an apparently normal childhood, had deliberately, cruelly, systematically forged a terminal diagnosis of advanced stage for metastatic pancreatic cancer merely to financially extort, emotionally manipulate, psychologically devastate his own dedicated only daughter, who desperately sold her small apartment, conquered arduously through 10 years of tireless work and disciplined savings to pay for a supposedly extremely expensive international experimental medical treatment that would miraculously save his precious life. The hospital corridor began spinning dizzily, tilting dangerously as if I were inside a ship violently rocking in a furious ocean storm. Impeccable white walls blurred, transforming into nauseating distorted whirlpools. Fluorescent lights flickering stroboscopically, burning hypersensitized retina, ambient sound of distant medical conversations and electronic beeps from equipment monitoring critical patients, amplifying cacophonously inside my skull, hammering painfully like rhythmic metallic beats of a pneumatic hammer, destroying resistant concrete. I felt my knees wobbling dangerously, threatening to collapse completely, letting me embarrassingly crumble on the impeccably clean and disinfected gray linoleum floor, breathing, accelerating, uncontrollably transforming into characteristic, gasping hyperventilation of a fulminant panic attack beginning to systematically dominate my betrayed body. Heart racing, tachycardically beating so violently, rapidly, irregularly against sore ribs that I genuinely feared I was experiencing a real heart attack instead of just a severe psychosomatic emotional collapse induced by a devastating traumatic revelation. The receptionist with blonde hair professionally pulled back in a perfect bun and impeccable light blue uniform immediately professionally noticed my alarming progressive physical deterioration, quickly rising from her ergonomic swivel chair behind a modern polished granite counter, hastily circumventing the architectural obstacle to firmly, supportively hold my trembling elbow before I completely collapsed, losing consciousness embarrassingly. "Ma'am, you need to sit down immediately. You're visibly in acute traumatic shock. Let me help you to that comfortable cushioned chair over there. Breathe deeply, slowly, rhythmically as I'm demonstrating," she instructed authoritatively but gently, carefully guiding me through unsteady, staggering steps to a comfortable hospital armchair, upholstered in beige synthetic leather, strategically positioned in a quiet adjacent waiting area, gently but firmly pushing my dizzy head between violently trembling knees in the classic recovery position for imminent fainting, while vigorously, comfortingly rubbing my tense back through an expensive charcoal gray professional blazer crumpled by cold, sticky sweat soaking the white silk blouse underneath. "Stay here seated quietly. I'll get cold water and sugar. You appear to be suffering from severe hypoglycemia in addition to obvious emotional shock. Don't move at all until I return quickly." She disappeared efficiently through a discreet side door marked "Employees Only," while I remained uncomfortably bent over, breathing laboriously through growing nausea, threatening to vomit the frugal breakfast consumed hastily 5 hours ago, before rushing desperately from home, driving dangerously above the permitted speed limit through chaotic morning traffic to urgently arrive at the hospital to personally verify the updated status of the chemotherapy treatment my father claimed to be receiving weekly religiously for the last 6 consecutive weeks since the completely fabricated initial diagnosis. 6 weeks before that apocalyptic revealing morning at the hospital, my father Henry had called my corporate cell phone during normal banking hours on an ordinary Tuesday in April at precisely 14:17 hours, a time permanently recorded in call logs that I revisited obsessively, compulsively hundreds of times, subsequently trying to retrospectively identify obvious signs of deliberate lies that I should have detected immediately, but family naivety completely blinded, his voice sounding strangely muffled, tremulous, dramatically broken, as if he was suppressing emotional sobs, or perhaps more likely carefully rehearsing an Oscar-worthy performance of a dedicated father confronting inevitable premature mortality. B. My beloved daughter, I need to urgently talk to you about a delicate, serious, frightening matter that I recently discovered and have been cowardly postponing telling you because I didn't want to unnecessarily worry you or burden you beyond the professional stress you already carry daily at that exploitative bank. He began strategically pausing, allowing dramatic suspense to build naturally before continuing with the perfectly rehearsed revelation. I had routine medical exams last month because I'd been feeling persistent abdominal pains, unexplained loss of appetite, involuntary weight loss of 18 pounds in 2 months, and the results came back devastating. Terrifying. Advanced pancreatic cancer has already metastasized to my liver. The oncologist frankly said that without immediate aggressive treatment, I have at most 6 months of progressively declining miserable survival. His words fell on me like a frozen avalanche of boulders, violently crushing everything in its destructive path. The artificially climate-controlled corporate office, instantly freezing despite the temperature maintained constantly at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Bank colleagues chatting animatedly about lucrative investments and approaching quarterly bonuses became a distant, incomprehensible, muffled murmur, as if I were submerged deeply under murky water. Dual-screen computer displaying complex financial spreadsheets of wealthy clients, blurring transformingly into abstract colored stains without discernible meaning. Expensive Mont Blanc pen gift from recent managerial promotions slipping from suddenly numb, insensitive fingers, falling noisily onto the silent mechanical keyboard. Dad, this can't really be happening. There must be a medical diagnostic error. Exams accidentally switched with a different patient. We need a second specialized opinion immediately. A third, if necessary. We can't simply resignedly accept a premature death sentence without aggressively fighting all available therapeutic options. I stammered incoherently, tears already uncontrollably sprouting, flowing hot, salty down normally professionally controlled cheeks in a conservative corporate environment, nearby colleagues obviously noticing my alarming sudden transformation from composed professional to woman, emotionally crumbling in witnessable real time. I already sought a second opinion confirming the original devastating diagnosis. A highly recommended oncologist specialized in complex pancreatic cases said there is a promising new experimental treatment, recently approved, available at a specialized private oncology reference hospital, combining genetically targeted chemotherapy with personalized immunotherapy that demonstrated surprising success rates of 63% in significantly prolonging survival, drastically improving remaining quality of life. Henry continued with carefully calibrated, dramatically hopeful voice, tremulously emotional. The complex problem is that the innovative treatment costs $80,000, complete, not covered by the precarious public health plan I have through my miserable government retirement. And obviously, I don't have that substantial financial amount saved, considering I survive monthly on modest benefits of $3,200 after loyally contributing decades to a corrupt, exploitative pension system. I know I'm asking for a monstrous sacrifice. I know you worked tirelessly for years conquering modest but significant patrimony, but I'm literally desperately begging for my life, for the opportunity to meet future grandchildren you'll eventually give me, for the chance to age with dignity instead of painfully withering miserably in the coming months. I didn't hesitate a single second. No moment of prudent reflection or sensible questioning occurred because this was my father. The man who raised me single-handedly, devotedly after my mother, Marcia, divorced him when I was only 12 years old, taking away my older brother Rodrigo, who chose to stay with her in a different geographically distant city. The man who worked exhausting double shifts to pay for a decent private school, providing quality education that allowed me to win a full university scholarship at a respectable college studying financial administration. The man who attended my university graduation alone, applauding proudly when I received my diploma under bright spotlights in the auditorium packed with celebrating families. Dad, you don't even need to formally ask or feel minimally embarrassed. I'll do absolutely everything humanly possible to get this necessary life-saving money immediately. I'll go to the bank first thing tomorrow morning requesting the maximum permitted payroll loan deducted directly from my salary. Maybe I can get 60% of the necessary value that way. And then I'll consider selling my apartment quickly, even below fair market value, to urgently supplement the remainder. I responded determinedly, firmly, without perceptible hesitation, my usual professional banking voice automatically returning, assuming temporary emotional control to solve a complex logistical problem as I would with any corporate financial challenge presented daily. Beatrice, my wonderful, generous daughter, I always knew I could count on you unconditionally. You are literally my earthly salvation, my only hope of survival beyond these terrifying months. I solemnly promise that when I completely recover through this miraculous treatment, I'll dedicate every remaining day generously compensating you, helping you rebuild the nobly sacrificed patrimony, being a dedicated present grandfather to your future children. He promised emotionally, his voice convincingly breaking in a perfectly theatrically executed muffled sob. That devastating transformative Tuesday, after hanging up the call, ending the banking shift prematurely, claiming urgent family emergency to my understanding worry. Supervisor! I drove automatically in a trance to the small one-bedroom apartment, located in a modest 15-story building that I had proudly bought 3 years ago after disciplinedly saving a 30% down payment during 5 consecutive years of voluntary price, renouncing international vacations, expensive restaurants, brand-name clothes, investing every saved penny, building modest but significant patrimony representing meritocratically conquered financial independence. I sat on the comfortable beige sofa bought in 12 interest-free installments, looking around the small but cozy space personally decorated with inspirational motivational paintings, lovingly cared for ornamental plants, framed photographs of few but precious happy family moments. Clearly, painfully realizing that I would need to sacrifice everything patiently built to save my father's life because the alternative choice of passively watching his progressively miserable decline was incomprehensibly, unimaginably, emotionally intolerable. The next morning, a gray, cloudy Wednesday in April, perfectly reflecting my heavy, somber emotional state, I went to the bank branch where I worked formally, requesting from the credit manager known colleague the maximum permitted payroll loan automatically deducted from my monthly salary of $7,400 for the subsequent 48 months with absurd compound interest of 3.9% monthly that I quickly mentally calculated would mean eventually paying almost double the borrowed principal amount, but usual prudent financial considerations completely evaporated before desperate medical urgency. Simultaneously, I contacted 3 different real estate agencies requesting quick evaluation and urgent commercialization of the apartment, honestly explaining that I needed immediate liquidity, willing to accept reasonable offers even below fair market price too. Close the sale in weeks instead of the months typically necessary. An experienced 50-year-old real estate broker visited the apartment that same afternoon, critically evaluating each modest but well-maintained room, suggesting a sale price of $230,000 for quick movement, considering the current stagnant recessionary real estate market, although fair valuation should be $270,000 based on recent comparables of similar units sold slowly in previous months. I accepted immediately, without negotiating, because each delayed day potentially meant additional cancer progression, reducing my father's therapeutic success chances, agonizingly suffering painfully, secretly without complaining, stoically as he always did during an entire life of dignified Miraculously, surprisingly, a young professional couple looking for a safe real estate investment to later rent visited the apartment just 3 days later, immediately fell in love with the convenient location near subway stations and varied commerce, offered $220,000 cash for quick closing in 2 weeks, dispensing with lengthy bureaucratic bank financing. I gratefully, relievedly accepted the offer, despite losing an additional $10,000 beyond the $40,000 already sacrificed in deliberate undervaluation, because medical urgency completely superseded usual rational economic considerations. The payroll loan was efficiently approved, releasing $53,000 electronically deposited in my checking account within 72 hours of accelerated processing. The apartment sale bureaucratically finalized in exactly 14 business days, transferring $220,000. Clean after deduction of real estate commissions, notary fees, mandatory municipal taxes on real estate transactions. Adding immediately available values. I now possess $273,000 liquid available, well beyond the $80,000 necessary for my father's life-saving oncological treatment. But I decided prudently, providently, to maintain a substantial emergency reserve because complex medical treatments frequently present additional unforeseen costs not initially budgeted, expensive complementary medications not covered by standard protocols, unexpected prolonged admissions in intensive care units charging frightening stratospheric daily rates. I called my father emotionally, triumphantly announcing that I had managed to gather the complete necessary financial resources plus a comfortable safety margin through substantial patrimonial sacrifices, but which I considered absolutely justified, worth it saving his precious life. Henry responded with effusive, apparently genuine gratitude, voice emotionally choked repeatedly, thanking endlessly, blessing me, solemnly promising never to forget the monumental sacrifice I was altruistically making on his behalf. Precious Beatrice, I don't have adequate sufficient words expressing the immeasurable depth of my eternal gratitude. I solemnly promise that as soon as I completely recover from this oncological nightmare through the miraculous treatment your generosity will enable, I'll dedicate the rest of my existence adequately compensating you, helping you rebuild everything you nobly sacrificed. He emotionally swore. We arranged to meet personally the next day to effect the electronic bank transfer of $80 directly from my account to his, because the hospital supposedly required full advance payment before starting the expensive experimental therapeutic protocol with rare imported medications. Acquired exclusively through advance international order, we met on an ironically sunny May morning at a busy centrally located bank branch in the city. My father, visibly appearing thinner effectively than I remembered from our last casual family encounter 2 months earlier at his birthday, where he seemed perfectly healthy, robust, happily consuming barbecue generously and cold beer abundantly without any perceptible sign of devastating terminal illness. But I attributed the obvious recent weight loss to natural aggressive cancer progression and characteristic loss of appetite in patients suffering persistent nausea induced by anticipatory anxiety about upcoming aggressive chemotherapy treatments known for severe debilitating side effects. We sat side by side in a semi-private self-service banking booth. Me efficiently operating the touchscreen, typing sequential passwords, authenticate the substantial financial transaction, while he observed silently, patiently, hands slightly visibly trembling that I interpreted as understandable nervousness about the invasive medical treatment about to begin, or perhaps overwhelming emotional gratitude for the unconditional filial generosity I was demonstrating. I confirmed the irrevocable electronic transfer of $80,000 from my hard-earned savings account to his checking account, the screen displaying official confirmation with unique protocol number, precisely recorded time. Values automatically debited and credited, instantly processed through modern, efficient digital banking system. Done, Dad. The money is immediately available in your account now. You can proceed scheduling the initial consultation with a specialist oncologist, starting the therapeutic protocol urgently, without more dangerous delays, risking additional progression. I spoke relievedly, hugging him tightly, feeling prominent bones through a social shirt to loose, confirming real significant worrying weight loss. Promise me faithfully that you'll start treatment immediately this same week, without cowardly procrastinating from understandable fear of temporary side effects that will definitely be preferable to the horrible alternative of progressive decline without life-saving medical intervention. Henry nodded emphatically, hugging me prolongedly, kissing my forehead paternally as he did when I was a small child, returning frightened from terrifying nightmares, seeking protective comfort in his strong arms, whispering low near my ear that he would start oncological treatment the following Monday, as already previously scheduled, with the specialized hospital. We said goodbye emotionally in the external parking lot of the bank branch under scorching midday sun, him entering an old but well-maintained sedan, supposedly driving home to psychologically prepare himself for the challenging therapeutic journey beginning in just 4 business days. Me returning to the bank, fulfilling the second work shift, trying to distract myself from persistent medical concerns, focusing on complex financial spreadsheets demanding meticulous, concentrated attention, avoiding costly errors. The subsequent weeks transpired in an established, predictable routine pattern. My father called weekly religiously, always on Thursdays around 1800 hours after supposedly completing the weekly experimental chemotherapy session at the specialized private hospital, detailing expected severe side effects including debilitating nausea controlled medicinally with expensive extreme fatigue limiting simple daily activities, progressive hair loss beginning already in the second week of treatment as oncologically expected, but always concluding telephone reports with cautious optimism about blood tumor markers gradually improving according to weekly laboratory exams monitoring therapeutic response. I offered repeatedly, insistently to personally accompany him to chemotherapy sessions offering emotional support during prolonged hours of intravenous infusion of potent cytotoxic medications, but he refused politely, firmly claiming he preferred to stoically face treatment alone without additionally worrying me beyond the monumental financial sacrifice already made. That sessions were monotonous, boring, consisting primarily of sitting passively in a hospital recliner for 4 to 5 consecutive hours while medication slowly dripped through a surgically implanted central venous catheter. That specialized oncology nurses provided adequate sufficient support during medically supervised infusions. I reluctantly accepted his repeated refusals of companionship because I respected his autonomy independently, deciding how he would like to personally face the emotionally challenging oncological journey, focusing alternatively on rebuilding my own financial life, devastated by recent substantial sacrifices. I moved temporarily back to a tiny rented apartment I had lived in years before when newly graduated university starting my banking career. A claustrophobic space of only 320 square feet with minimal basic but functional furniture costing only $800, monthly modest rent allowing maximum savings from salary, significantly reduced by automatic payroll loan deductions, compromising 43% of net monthly earnings for the next 48 consecutive endless months. I sold comfortable furniture and beloved personal decorations from the sold apartment that new buyers didn't want to acquire together with the property, negotiating depressingly derisory prices with opportunistic used goods buyers exploiting urgent need for immediate liquidity, obtaining only $12,000 additional dollars through painful patrimonial liquidation of belongings lovingly accumulated during years of dedicated hard work. However, 6 weeks after that fateful, irrevocable bank transfer of $80,000, subtle, uncomfortable, persistent doubts began emerging, gradually transforming into genuine, well-founded suspicions. My father appeared progressively healthier, robust, energetic instead of expectedly debilitated by aggressive chemotherapy. Hair remained abundant, voluminous, without perceptible signs of characteristic universal hair loss from systemic cytotoxic treatments. Skin maintained healthy pink coloration instead of typical anemic pallor of oncological patients subjected to severe myelosuppressive therapeutic protocols, affecting red blood cell production in bone marrow. When I delicately questioned about surprisingly healthy appearance during routine weekly phone call, he quickly explained that he was responding exceptionally well to the innovative treatment exceeding conservative oncological expectations, that the oncologist was professionally impressed with rapid tumor regression demonstrated through sequential imaging exams showing measurable significant decrease of pancreatic that side effects were being effectively managed through adjuvant support medications, minimizing debilitating symptoms, allowing maintenance of relatively normal quality of life. Explanations sounded plausibly medical, but something intangible, instinctive, deeply disturbed my banking intuition, professionally trained to detect suspicious inconsistencies in financial narratives of clients investigating substantial loans. I decided, unilaterally, determinedly, to personally visit the specialized private oncology hospital, objectively verifying my father's treatment status without informing him previously, because if treatment was progressing wonderfully, as he enthusiastically reported, then there would be no problem whatsoever in independently confirming his medical history with the responsible oncology team directly. That's how I found myself that apocalyptic revealing Tuesday morning in June, standing paralyzed in the impeccable hospital corridor, hearing the polite receptionist repeat the devastating impossibility that my father had never been a registered patient at that prestigious medical institution. After partially recovering from the initial paralyzing shock, sipping cold sugared water solidarily provided by the worried, compassionate receptionists, I desperately insisted, repeatedly questioning whether perhaps there was a computer system error, records incorrectly archived under a slightly different name, outpatient consultations not properly registered in the main database, any plausible alternative explanation that would reconcile the glaring discrepancy between his reports and official hospital records. The receptionist patiently consulted a senior administrative supervisor with gray hair and bifocal glasses who meticulously verified manually archived physical records in addition to the modern digital system, definitively, irrevocably, devastatingly confirming that no Henry Augustus Ferreira appeared in treatment records performed during the last 5 complete years, easily accessible. The absolute emotional devastation of this irrefutable official confirmation was simultaneously paralyzing, numbing, and infuriating, energizing paradoxically. Part of my fragmented, traumatized consciousness stubbornly refused to accept the monstrous, impossible reality that my own father had maliciously invented terminal disease, fabricated elaborate medical narrative, cruelly deceived me, extorting $80,000, sacrificially conquered, selling unique, modest, but precious patrimony, symbolizing years of dedicated, disciplined work, while an alternative, growing, angry part demanded immediate, furious confrontation, exposing his lies, publicly destroying his completely fabricated reputation. I left the hospital dazedly in a dissociative trance, automatically driving on autopilot through chaotic urban traffic without consciously registering the route, until parking illegally in front of the modest masonry house, painted faded yellow, where my father theoretically lived alone in a distant peripheral neighborhood. I approached the varnished wooden entrance door insistently, furiously, repeatedly knocking with clenched fists, painfully injuring myself until he reluctantly opened with a confused interrogative expression, quickly transforming into recognizable panic when he saw uncontrollable fury clearly stamped on my normally professionally controlled face. "Beatrice, what happened? Why are you here without warning previously? Is everything okay?" he asked, falsely concerned, trying to maintain solicitous paternal facade but calculating eyes, betraying growing nervousness of professional liar, perceiving that fraudulent scheme was imminently crumbling. "I just returned from the hospital where you supposedly are receiving life-saving chemotherapy treatment weekly religiously for 6 consecutive weeks, spending $80,000 you extorted from me through monstrous, elaborate lies about completely fabricated terminal pancreatic cancer," I responded coldly, controlledly, with voice trembling, containing volcanic fury about to erupt violently. "The receptionist officially, definitively, irrevocably confirmed that you were never a registered patient at that medical institution. No consultation, no treatment, no record whatsoever existing in their complete systems. So I ask you directly, clearly, ultimatively, where is my money, and why did you invent a false terminal disease just to cruelly rob me?" The expression on Henry's face instantly, dramatically transformed from falsely innocent confusion to genuine, recognizable panic when he definitively, irreversibly realized that his meticulously elaborate, fraudulent scheme during months of careful planning had been completely discovered. Brutally exposed through my unexpected hospital investigation, verifying authenticity of his medical claims that I always naively, trustingly accepted without minimally questioning for being my biological father who supposedly loved me unconditionally. He tried to stammer incoherent explanations, excuses hastily improvised about bureaucratic hospital misunderstandings, medical records incorrectly archived under a slightly different name due to common administrative errors in overburdened health systems, consultations performed at private satellite clinics not directly linked to the main hospital I had mistakenly visited seeking documentary confirmation. But each word coming from his mouth sounded progressively more desperate, transparently false, pathetically inadequate before the irrefutable evidence I calmly, coldly presented, holding an envelope containing bank receipts of the electronic transfer. "Stop lying shamelessly, Dad, or should I start calling you just Henry, considering true fathers don't cruelly, deliberately rob their own daughters through elaborate scams, cynically exploiting unconditional filial love and natural family trust?" I coldly interrupted his pathetic attempt at impossible justification, voice trembling not from emotional sadness but from contained fury growing volcanically inside my chest, oppressed by incomprehensible family betrayal, devastating beyond any previous painful experience lived during 37 years of relatively protected existence from extreme, deliberate, calculated human. The hospital categorically, definitely, unquestionably confirmed that you were never a registered patient, never received any oncological treatment, never consulted a specialist on, never performed diagnostic exams confirming pancreatic cancer, completely fabricated by your criminal imagination. Everything was elaborate, theatrical, convincingly executed lies just to extort $80,000 that I sacrificially gathered, selling an apartment arduously conquered through an entire decade, working tirelessly, disciplinedly saving every honestly earned penny, unlike you, who apparently live systematically deceiving innocent, trusting people. Henry physically recoiled 2 staggering steps backward as if my accusatory words were violent physical punches painfully hitting him. Body visibly shrinking under crushing weight of guilt, finally publicly exposed. Mask of dedicated father concerned about deteriorating health rapidly disintegrating, completely revealing true manipulative, selfish nature? Devoid of any genuine remorse or functional moral conscience that should naturally exist in minimally ethical, decent human beings. He opened his mouth trying to articulate more useless denials, but I authoritatively raised my hand, abruptly silencing him. Iron determination completely replacing initial emotional vulnerability that had characterized our family relationship during decades of subtle psychological manipulation. I finally retrospectively recognized analyzing his historical behavioral patterns with brutal clarity, provided by recent monumental betrayal impossible to rationalize or adequately justify through usual convenient excuses. Where is the money exactly right now at this moment? Did you transfer it to a specific bank account? Did you invest in some parallel fraudulent business? Did you spend buying superfluous, unnecessary material goods? I need to know in detail. Honestly, for the first time in your pathetic life, what you did precisely with $80,000 cruelly stolen from your only daughter, who always faithfully supported you, helped financially repeatedly during consecutive years. Naively believing in your fabricated stories about temporary financial difficulties surmountable with solitary family assistance. Henry finally, emotionally, psychologically crumbled under relentless pressure of direct confrontational interrogation. Knees fragilely bending until sitting heavily on an old fabric sofa worn torn in several points, revealing yellow, deteriorated foam internally. Face buried between convulsively trembling hands while beginning crying pathetic sounds of old broken. Man confronting inevitable consequences of morally repugnant choices systematically repeated during entire existence, characterized by habitual dishonesty, calculated manipulation, cynical exploitation of vulnerable, trusting nearby people. I completely renovated Sandra's house, my current companion of 7 years, who finally makes me feel valued, respected, genuinely loved, unlike your mother Marcia, who always constantly criticized me, publicly diminished me, financially controlled me during suffocating miserable marriage of 23 endless years. He finally confessed between dramatic sobs, possibly genuine or perhaps just another manipulative theatrical performance trying to awaken. Residual filial compassion he certainly still naively hoped I maintained despite the devastatingly revealed monstrous betrayal. Sandra deserved a beautiful, comfortable, modern house after years living in precarious conditions, renting a deteriorated property in a dangerous peripheral neighborhood, working hard as an independent manicure, supporting herself independently without exploitative male help. I used your money completely renovating her old structure. We replaced the constantly leaking roof, causing internal wall infiltrations, installed new flooring replacing irregularly dangerously broken ceramic, painted external internal walls in cheerful modern colors, bought comfortable new furniture replacing old pieces inherited donated by solidary neighbors, modern appliances facilitating daily domestic life. I listened to his confession with growing incredulity, progressively transforming into absolute incandescent fury when I completely, definitively understood that my father had deliberately, premeditatedly invented false terminal disease just to finance luxurious residential renovation, benefiting current companion using money cruelly extorted from me through emotional manipulation, cynical exploitation of unconditional filial love that he cynically knew I felt profoundly despite historically complicated, problematic family relationship. You used $80,000 sacrificially conquered selling my only modest patrimony apartment patiently built during an entire decade of dedicated work to renovate the house of a woman I don't even personally know, while I currently live in a tiny claustrophobic rented apartment of 320 square feet paying $800 additional monthly dollars. Severely compromising tight budget limited by automatic payroll loan deductions. Contracted specifically to pay your completely fabricated supposed oncological treatment. I questioned with voice progressively rising from initially controlled volume to finally uncontrolled scream. Liberating, repressed accumulated anger during weeks since traumatic, devastating hospital discovery. How can you be so selfish, cruel, absolutely devoid of any minimal sense of parental responsibility, basic human decency, elementary functional morality? I'm your only biological daughter born from your shared genetic blood. Child you theoretically raised during vulnerable childhood after traumatic divorce from Marcia, permanently separating family, fragmenting family nucleus permanently, adult woman who always repeatedly helped you financially when you claimed temporary difficulties surmountable with solitary family assistance. Henry abruptly rose from the sofa, physically confronting me for the first time during the entire conversation. Intimidatingly approaching, invading personal space, violating appropriate boundaries of safe, comfortable social distance. index finger accusatorily pointing threateningly directed close to my face, while facial expression transformed from embarrassed guilt to aggressive defensive anger, a characteristic of narcissistic manipulators irrefutably. Confronted with consequences of morally indefensible actions systematically executed. Don't judge me superiorly as if you were a morally impeccable, perfect saint, Beatrice. Your mother left me emotionally destroyed, financially ruined after petty divorce, where she kept the conjugal apartment, half of jointly accumulated savings, absurd alimony of 40% of my modest retirement benefits supporting your spoiled brother, Rodrigo, who deliberately chose to stay with her, cruelly abandoning me when I needed solidary masculine family support. He defensively shouted, trying to deflect blame responsibility, unjustly transferring blame to other innocent people, not directly related to current specific fraud committed exclusively by him voluntarily. I worked miserably for decades in corrupt bureaucratic public office, earning ridiculous insufficient salaries, supporting ungrateful family who never adequately appreciated sacrifices I made, renouncing personal dreams, professional ambitions to guarantee minimum necessary financial stability. I finally deserve some late happiness with Sandra, who genuinely values me, unlike all of you who only constantly criticize me, continually demanded financially. Morally judged superiorly, I instinctively recoiled before his growing verbal aggressiveness, dangerously perceiving that the situation could violently, physically escalate if I didn't strategically, intelligently de-escalate tension, breathing deeply, controlling breathing accelerated by intense emotional confrontation, while brain quickly processed effective communication strategies to extract necessary additional information without provoking extreme defensive reaction, potentially physically dangerous considering I was alone, vulnerable in his house without protective witnesses present if domestic violence suddenly occurred. Okay, Henry, I understand you have partially justified accumulated resentments about difficult traumatic divorce with Marcia and complicated relationship with geographically, emotionally distant Rodrigo. I spoke deliberately, calmly, using conciliatory, appeasing tone, trying to strategically disarm his aggressive defensiveness to continue, extracting crucial information necessary to fully document committed fraud, aiming to eventually criminally prosecute, partially recover stolen values through appropriate subsequent civil criminal judicial actions. But regardless of complicated problematic family history, inventing false terminal disease to extort money from your own daughter constitutes a serious crime, legally punishable beyond being morally indefensible, ethically repugnant, humanly inexplicably cruel. We need to resolve this situation civilizedly, rationally as adults, instead of continuing to unproductively shout mutual accusations. So I ask again calmly, how much money currently remains from the $80,000 transferred? Did Sandra's renovation consume the complete totality, or does a partially recoverable remaining balance exist? Henry sat again heavily on the worn sofa, suddenly appearing visibly aged decades beyond 63 real chronological years. Defeated, curved body posture, transmitting emotional psychological exhaustion of man, finally confronting inevitable consequences of destructive choices repeated during existence, characterized by habitual dishonesty. Previous aggressive defensive energy rapidly evaporating, replaced by tired resignation of guilty person irrefutably exposed without plausible escape or convincing remaining denial available. I spent approximately $62,000 on complete renovation of the house, including construction materials, bought cash, negotiating substantial commercial discounts, contracted labor of masons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, painters, working continuously during 8 consecutive weeks, transforming the property into comfortable modern residence worthy. He finally admitted with monotone, defeated voice, devoid of apparent emotion. Eyes fixed on floor, avoiding direct eye contact with me, possibly from minimal residual shame or perhaps just natural psychological discomfort of habitual liar, irrefutably confronted with inconvenient truth. Approximately $18,000 remains still deposited in joint savings account, mine with Sandra, originally reserved to buy. Reliable used car replacing her old vehicle, constantly presenting costly mechanical problems requiring frequent monthly repairs, consuming significant percentage of her modest income working as independent manicurist, attending popular female clientele in small rented salon in peripheral neighborhood distant from prosperous commercial urban center. $18,000 potentially recoverable dollars from $80,000 originally stolen represented only 22.5% of total extorted value. Substantial, devastating financial loss, but at least partially recoverable through appropriate subsequent legal actions, including judicial blocking of joint bank account, preventing additional withdrawal or transfer, while criminal civil processes slowly moved through notoriously slow, bureaucratic, frustrating Brazilian judicial system for victims seeking adequate justice reparation. reputation. I'm going to the police immediately to file formal detailed criminal complaint for qualified fraud, ideological falsification of non-existent disease, misappropriation of values through premeditated fraud, exploitation of family trust. I declared firmly, decisively, with voice recovering authoritative strength after initial moments of emotional vulnerability, carefully observing his facial reaction to concrete threat of real legal criminal consequences, replacing only practically ineffective verbal moral Additionally, I'll hire a criminal lawyer specialized in family patrimonial crimes, initiating civil action for material moral damages repair, seeking to maximally recover, possible through judicial blocking of your bank account, seizure of mobile, immobile assets legally registered in your name, compulsory direct discount from your monthly retirement benefits until complete settlement of judicially established debt, including appropriate legally calculated monetary correction, compensatory punitive interest. The specific mention of concrete criminal legal consequences seemed to finally penetrate his numbed consciousness, because facial expression again transformed from tired resignation to genuine, recognizable panic. Apparently perceiving for the first time that I wasn't just verbally impotently complaining as emotionally her daughter, but was genuinely determined to pursue complete legal justice using all available institutional resources. Brazilian judicial system offered 2 victims of serious family patrimonial crimes. Beatrice, please, don't unnecessarily involve police creating humiliating public scandal that will irreparably prejudice my community reputation. Current relationship with Sandra, who completely unknowingly about true origin of funds used renovating her house naively, believing I received unexpected inheritance from distant deceased uncle, recently leaving me substantial monetary legacy as I invented, explaining sudden, atypical financial availability. He pathetically pleaded with trembling, supplicating voice, hands theatrically joined in desperate religious supplication gesture, characteristic of narcissistic manipulators trying to awaken victims. Compassion, empathy, when other manipulative tactics completely failed. If you fraudulently expose before police authorities, Sandra will inevitably discover that I also deceived her, lying about money origin. Will immediately terminate relationship, abandoning me alone again at this late life stage when I had finally found compatible companion, offering genuine late happiness after decades of miserable post-divorce, loneliness, traumatic. We can resolve this privately, familiarly, amicably, without involving external public institutions. I'll negotiate gradual monthly return of remaining $18,000 plus reasonable additional compensatory value, discounted, directly from my retirement monthly during necessary years until complete satisfactory settlement. I coldly observed his pathetic plea without emotionally demonstrating any compassion or consideration for the delicate situation he himself deliberately created through conscious, voluntary, fraudulent choices. Clearly recognizing the classic manipulative pattern of narcissistic abusers, commit deliberate, morally indefensible, cruel acts, and then when confronted plead for mercy, emotionally appealing to residual feelings of family affective connection, hoping victim will sacrifice, deserves justice to protect perpetrator's reputation or his relationships with innocent third parties not directly involved in original specific fraud. Your plea is completely irrelevant, Henry, because the decision to criminally prosecute you is non-negotiable, reversible, or dependent on any future promise of voluntary gradual restitution that you probably would never fully comply with, as historical pattern of repeatedly broken promises during entire decades clearly demonstrates. I responded icily, without hesitation or perceptible doubt, unshakable iron determination completely replacing any residue of family sentimentality. He still naively hoped to manipulatively exploit, as he had successfully done repeatedly during my childhood adolescence when I was more psychologically vulnerable, easily, emotionally manipulated, incapable of appropriately firmly establishing healthy boundaries. Additionally, Sandra deserves to know complete truth about fraudulent character of man she currently shares life with, because if you so elaborately, convincingly deceived me during entire months fabricating false terminal disease, complete with plausible specific medical details, certainly you're also deceiving her in multiple aspects of relationships she completely unknows. It would be morally irresponsible on my part to allow another innocent, trusting woman to continue being deceived, potentially financially, emotionally exploited by you without appropriately alerting her about your true, demonstrably habitual, dishonest nature. Offering her necessary information to make conscious, informed decisions about relationship future with demonstrably dishonest, habitual man. The implicit threat of revealing complete truth to Sandra seemed to finally break his last remaining psychological defenses, because he completely collapsed, genuinely crying uncontrollably for the first time during entire confrontation. Convulsive sobs, shaking defeated curved body, while reality of inevitable imminent consequences of fraudulent actions finally penetrated consciousness. Previously protected by defensive psychological denial, convenient rationalization, minimization of clearly, morally, legally indefensible criminal behavior severity. I remained standing coldly, observing his emotional collapse without offering any physical, verbal comfort because any consoling gesture would be erroneously interpreted as weakness. Premature forgiveness, encouraging him to continue habitual manipulative exploitative behavior, and because frankly I felt no genuine compassion whatsoever for a man who had deliberately, premeditatedly, cruelly deceived me, cynically, exploiting unconditional filial love, natural family trust, to personally financially enrich himself at my devastating costs, sacrificing my unique modus patrimony, arduously conquered, working dedicatedly during an entire decade, disciplinedly saving every honestly earned penny. After approximately 5 long minutes of his pathetic, uncontrollable crying, I breathed deeply, psychologically preparing myself to pronounce final ultimatum-ending domestic confrontation because I needed to immediately leave that oppressive claustrophobic house, driving myself directly to nearest police station, formally registering detailed criminal complaint before momentary courage, determination evaporated, replaced by paralysis and doubts, inappropriate sentimental family considerations that could dangerously weaken necessary resolution to pursue complete legal justice regardless of inevitable painful subsequent family relational consequences. I'm leaving now immediately from this house. Driving myself directly to police station, registering formal detailed criminal complaint, fully documenting elaborate fraud systematically committed during consecutive months. I announced, firmly, decisively, turning toward exit door, without again looking at his pathetic figure, miserably huddled on worn sofa. In approximately 5 business days after initial police registration, you'll receive official judicial notification to appear at station, giving formal testimony, answering detailed questioning about specific accusations formulated against you, including qualified fraud, exploitation of family trust, ideological falsification of non-existent medical condition, misappropriation of substantial values through premeditated, calculated fraud. I strongly suggest you hire competent criminal lawyers specialized in defense of patrimonial crimes because accusations are serious, grave, potentially resulting in criminal conviction with significant prison sentence. If prosecution decides to criminally prosecute based on robust evidence, I'll provide in detail. Henry staggeringly rose from sofa, trying to physically approach, perhaps trying to reconciliationally hug me, or perhaps just physically block my exit through door, preventing fulfillment of threat of immediate police involvement. But I quickly defensively recoiled, maintaining safe distance between us while right hand reached cell phone in pants pocket, prepared to dial emergency if he tried to forcibly physically prevent my voluntary immediate exit from his residence. Don't physically approach me again, Henry, because I'll interpret any non-consensual physical contact as potential violence threat justifying immediate emergency police call, reporting private imprisonment attempt to prevent witness, victim from reporting crime to competent authorities as guaranteed constitutional legal right. I threateningly warned with firm, controlled voice, despite heart tachicardically racing inside chest from adrenaline, genuine fear of potential physical confrontation with visibly desperate, irrational, potentially violent man trying to avoid imminent, inevitable criminal legal consequences. He abruptly stopped physical approach movement, remaining static 2 meters distant with arms fallen laterally along defeated body. Facial expression transformed from supplicant despair to final defeated resignation of man, finally, irreversibly understanding he had completely lost situational control. That habitual emotional manipulation wouldn't work effectively anymore with me as it had previously worked during decades of gradual psychological conditioning. That real serious consequences of fraudulent actions were inevitable, imminent, regardless of any evasive tactics he desperately tried to implement, delaying, postponing absolutely necessary legal moral accountability. I took advantage of his hesitation moment to move quickly, decisively toward entrance door, opening it violently without concern for disturbing noise, possibly alerting curious neighbors about domestic confrontation occurring inside modest, faded yellow residence, hastily exiting through small, poorly maintained front yard with irregularly grown grass apparently not cut for weeks. Finally reaching external sidewalk where my car was irregularly parked, partially occupying his garage entrance, accidentally blocking vehicular access if he decided to try immediately fleeing before police were officially notified about systematically committed fraud. I entered car quickly, immediately locking doors, activating ignition, with hands trembling from adrenaline coursing through overstimulated nervous system from intense traumatic emotional confrontation just happened. Immediately driving away from that quiet peripheral residential street where my father lived, isolated, apparently deceiving not only daughter but probably current companion, also through elaborate lies. convincingly theatrically performed stories as he had learned to perfectly do during entire decades, systematically practicing art of deception, manipulation, cynical exploitation of emotionally close, vulnerable, trusting people. I drove automatically on autopilot during approximately 15 minutes, mentally, emotionally processing complete magnitude of devastating parental betrayal, just irrefutably confirmed through his reluctant confession. Tears finally, uncontrollably sprouting, flowing hot, salty down cheeks, while dangerously driving at excessive speed through dense, chaotic urban traffic. Vision periodically blurred, forcing me to rapidly blink clear eyes with back of left hand maintaining right hand firmly on. Steering wheel minimally, safely controlling vehicle through busy streets. Eventually, I irregularly parked in front of a small, relatively deserted, tree-lined public square at that late weekday hour, turning off engine, remaining seated silently inside artificially air-conditioned car, processing conflicting contradictory emotions, crossing traumatized psyche. Intense anger directed against Henry for cruel, deliberate betrayal. Profound sadness for definitive loss of already historically problematic, but still sentimentally valued father-daughter relationship. Residual shame for having been so easily completely deceived despite being experienced financial professional, trained to detect fraud suspicious. Financial schemes, daily corporate banking work. I breathed deeply, repeatedly during approximately 10 minutes, practicing breathing control techniques recently learned on mindfulness meditation app, downloaded at suggestion of banking colleague concerned about visible stress. Levels progressively increasing during preceding weeks since fateful bank transfer, $80,000 to supposedly dying father urgently needing non-existent fabricated experimental life-saving oncological treatment. Finally, feeling marginally more emotionally, psychologically controlled, I grabbed cell phone, dialing Rodrigo's number, my 42-year-old older brother living different city, distant approximately 200 miles, with whom I maintained sporadic irregular contact primarily through occasional text messages, social media, because fraternal relationship had been permanently damaged by traumatic parental divorce when I was only 12 years old, he's 17 years old, choosing opposite sides of conjugal conflicts, supporting geographically separated different progenitors. Rodrigo, I need to urgently tell you about something devastating, serious related to our father. I hesitantly began when he answered call after 5 prolonged rings. His voice, initially sounding irritated, probably interrupted during important professional personal activity, but perceptibly softening when detecting genuine anguish in my habitually professionally controlled vocal tone. Beatrice, what happened? Is everything okay? Is Dad health okay? He concernedly questioned immediately. And cruel irony of his inadvertent question touching exactly the center of elaborate fraud made me hysterically and appropriately laugh during brief moment before controlling myself again, breathing deeply, controlling volatile emotions threatening to uncontrollably overflow again. Technically, he's perfectly physically healthy without any terminal oncological disease because he never had metastatic pancreatic cancer, as he falsely claimed 6 weeks ago when he called me dramatically crying, asking $80,000 urgently to pay non-existent life-saving experimental treatment. I bitterly responded, hearing his shocked silence, processing complete implication of my devastating accusatory words about moral character of biologically shared progenitor. I detailed chronologically to Rodrigo the entire complete sordid story from his initial devastating phone call, claiming false terminal diagnosis through my revealing hospital verification visit, discovering elaborate fraud, to recent domestic confrontation at his house, definitively confirming through reluctant confession that he had completely invented disease just to extort money, financing current companions, house renovation, using my resources sacrificially obtained, selling unique hard-earned patrimony apartment. Rodrigo listened silently, patiently during approximately 15 entire minutes without interrupting once, my narrative occasionally broken by uncontrollable emotional sobs. And when I finally finished reporting complete confrontation to final ultimatum, dramatic exit from his residence, my brother sighed long, deeply, before responding with voice loaded with frustration, anger directed not against me, but against demonstrably habitually dishonest shared father. Beatrice, I'm very sorry you went through this devastating traumatic experience. But honestly, I'm not surprised at all by revelation about his fraudulent character, because he tried to apply similar scheme on me approximately 5 years ago when he falsely claimed urgently needing $20,000 to pay supposedly immediately necessary emergency cardiac surgery, avoiding imminent sudden death from congenital valve problem recently discovered through routine preventive cardiological exams. Rodrigo shockingly revealed, adding additional horror layer to growing understanding about complete extension of our father's systematic predatory behavioral pattern during decades, probably repeatedly victimizing multiple vulnerable trusting people throughout entire life. Apparently characterized by habitual dishonesty, calculated manipulation, cynical exploitation. I refused to give money on that specific occasion because something instinctive intuition alerted me to distrust veracity of his medical claims. I requested to personally examine medical reports, hospital documentation proving urgent emergency surgical necessity, and he became visibly nervous, defensive, inventing flimsy excuses about temporarily misplaced documents during recent residential move. Ended up completely disappearing during subsequent 6 months without contacting me again, probably searching more easily financially manipulable alternative victims. Rodrigo explained in detail, voice loaded with bitterness, resentment accumulated from years of systematically repeated paternal disappointments. After that suspicious revealing episode, I cut practically complete contact with him, maintaining only minimum superficial obligatory communication during important family commemorative dates, like his birthdays or year-end holidays, when Marcia insisted organizing forced family reunions, trying to reconcile family permanently fragmented by traumatic divorce and his toxic behaviors during miserable marriage characterized by multiple betrayals, systematic lies, chronic financial irresponsibility. I vaguely warned you years ago to distrust any financial request from him, but apparently you ignored warnings, considering me excessively cynical, unfairly distrustful regarding biologically shared progenitor. I felt crushing weight of guilt, shame descending on me when I retrospectively recognized that Rodrigo had tried to subtly alert me during occasional sporadic phone conversations about his manipulative tendencies. But I had interpreted warnings as residual fraternal resentment from old parental divorce instead of legitimate concern founded on his direct personal traumatic experiences with similar previous fraudulent schemes attempted against him years before. Dismissing prudent advice as exaggerated, unjustified paranoia instead of wisdom painfully acquired through previous victimization. You're completely right, Rodrigo. I should have listened to your previous warnings, taking them seriously instead of defensively rationalizing them, protecting idealized paternal image I had naively built, ignoring obvious contradictory evidence accumulated during entire years of his problematic behavior. I painfully admitted, voice emotionally breaking from self-directed shame of having been so easily deceived despite multiple deliberately conveniently ignored warning signs. But now I face devastating financial emotional consequences of this misplaced trust and need your fraternal help support navigating complex criminal legal process I'll immediately initiate against him, seeking adequate justice reparation. Can you officially testify about his previous fraud attempt against you, providing evidence of systematic behavioral pattern of repeated family exploitation that will substantially strengthen criminal case against him, demonstrating habitual premeditation instead of unique, opportunistic, isolated incident? Rodrigo immediately enthusiastically agreed without perceptible hesitation, expressing even satisfaction at opportunity to finally judicially hold manipulative father accountable for decades of abusive behavior, escaping appropriate consequences through superficial charm, false promises, cynical emotional manipulation of vulnerable, trusting family members. Absolutely. Beatrice, I'll testify in detail before police judicial authorities about all problematic interactions with him over years, including previous extortion attempt through falsification of non-existent medical emergency. Additionally, I'll contact Marcia, informing her about recent fraud committed against you, requesting she also consider testifying about his historical patterns of dishonesty during prolonged miserable marriage characterized by systematic lies, multiple betrayals, chronic financial irresponsibility that inevitably culminated in necessary divorce, saving her mental health. He solidarily informed. I hung up the phone call with Rodrigo, feeling marginally less emotionally isolated, knowing I had solidary family support from brother and possibly mother also during difficult prolonged legal process imminently awaiting me. Breathing deeply, psychologically preparing myself for next necessary step, driving to nearest police station, formally registering detailed criminal complaint, officially initiating criminal process against Henry that would eventually result in deserved serious legal consequences for elaborate premeditated fraud systematically committed, cynically exploiting filial trust, unconditional family love. I drove slowly, carefully through dense evening urban traffic to district police station located in antiquated, deteriorated governmental building urgently, needing basic structural aesthetic renovations. Parking vehicle in designated visitors area, walking determinedly through noisily squeaking, rusty metal gate 2, internal reception where middle-aged uniformed officer, tired overloaded appearance, attended diverse citizens, reporting varied daily crimes. I need to register formal criminal complaint for qualified fraud, ideological falsification, misappropriation through premeditated family fraud. I firmly announced the receptionist officer, who raised surprised eyebrows, expressing renewed interest at accusations' gravity, professionally articulated using correct technical legal terminology, demonstrating uncommon legal knowledge in typical patrimonial crimes victims, generally reporting occurrences using imprecise, emotionally charged colloquial language. Ma'am, please sit here comfortably while I call on duty detective responsible for complex patrimonial crimes like your case appears to be based on preliminary description provided. He'll conduct detailed interview extensively documenting all relevant information necessary to initiate appropriate formal criminal investigation. The officer respectfully instructed, directing me to uncomfortable worn plastic chair adjacent to scratched metal desk covered with disorganizedly stacked official forms. I waited approximately 20 anxious, impatient minutes until on-duty detective emerged from internal room. Robust 50-year-old man, short gray hair, serious professional facial expression developed through decades dealing with diverse criminals, traumatized victims, daily. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Detective Marcelo, responsible for investigating family patrimonial crimes in this jurisdiction. I understand you want to register serious complaint against close family member involving substantial financial fraud through falsification of non-existent medical condition. He began directly professionally, gesturing me to follow him to small private interrogation room, minimally equipped with table chairs, digital recorder to officially document detailed testimony. I chronologically meticulously narrated entire complete story during approximately 1 uninterrupted hour while Detective Marcelo carefully noted crucial details, occasionally interrupting to ask specific clarifying questions about dates, values, available documentation, proving allegations. His facial expression remaining professionally neutral, but eyes revealing genuine compassion for devastating traumatic situation, I controlledly reported, despite intense emotions, internally turbulent. Mrs. Beatriz, your case clearly configures multiple serious crimes, including qualified fraud through exploitation of family relationship, ideological falsification of serious non-existent medical condition, misappropriation of substantial values through systematically calculated, premeditated fraud. He officially confirmed, after I concluded complete, exhaustive narrative, will immediately initiate formal criminal investigation, including Henry's summons to give testimony contradictorily explaining your allegations. Will judicially request access to his banking records, proving specific destination of transferred values. Will verify with hospital official confirmation of absence of his medical records, as you already independently verified. Based on robust evidence you preliminarily presented, including electronic transfer bank receipts, estimate partial values recovery through judicial blocking of his accounts, and eventual criminal conviction with significant prison sentence are statistically highly probable. I felt substantial relief at official validation of my allegations by experienced police authority confirming legal gravity of crimes committed against me, recognizing legitimacy of my indignation, justified anger from monstrous family betrayal, signing official documentation, formalizing detailed criminal complaint, receiving filed copy, proving official registration, beginning criminal investigative process. I left police station feeling emotionally exhausted but simultaneously empowered, strengthened by having taken concrete, decisive action, seeking appropriate legal justice. Instead of passively, resignedly accepting role of silent, impotent victim, driving directly to tiny rented apartment where I temporarily resided during gradual, slow, painful financial reconstruction, Sandra inevitably discovered through gossipy neighbors and local news about serious criminal accusations against Henry, including elaborate fraud against own daughter through falsification of non-existent terminal cancer. Furiously confronted him, demanding honest explanations about true origin of funds used renovating our house he had falsely claimed were unexpected inheritance received. When complete truth was inevitably revealed, including multiple systematic lies told during entire years of their relationship, Sandra immediately definitively terminated relationship, expelling him from fraudulently renovated residence with stolen money, leaving him socially isolated, financially devastated, facing multiple simultaneous consequences of morally repugnant, fraudulent choices systematically repeated during existence characterized by habitual dishonesty. 3 months after initial criminal complaint registration, public prosecution decided to criminally prosecute Henry based on overwhelmingly robust evidence compiled during meticulous police investigation, including official hospital confirmation of complete absence of his medical records, expert analysis of banking records demonstrating specific destination of values for residential renovation, benefiting third parties, multiple testimonies from Rodrigo and Marcia confirming historical pattern of his manipulative fraudulent behavior during decades. Criminal process moved relatively quickly by notoriously slow Brazilian judicial standards because evidence was unquestionably clear, robust, not allowing plausible argumentative defenses. And after 8 months since initial criminal complaint registration, Henry was formally judged, convicted, sentenced by competent criminal court. Judge pronounced severe condemnatory sentence considering particularly shocking gravity of crimes committed against only daughter, cynically exploiting filial trust, unconditional family love for selfish personal benefit. 5 years imprisonment, initially closed regime for qualified fraud. 2 additional years for ideological falsification, totaling 7 years effective prison, besides substantial fine and judicial obligation to fully restore stolen values added with appropriate legally calculated monetary correction punitive interest. Additionally, court determined immediate judicial blocking of joint savings account his with Sandra, where approximately $18,000 remaining dollars still remained transferring values to my bank account, partially compensating suffered devastating financial losses. An established compulsory monthly discount of 30% from his retirement benefits during indeterminate term until complete settlement of judicially established debt calculated at approximately $120,000, including principal stolen value plus appropriate punitive corrections. Although financial recovery was only partial, substantially inferior to originally stolen total value, because large part had been irreversibly consumed in structural renovations of third-party property. Impossible to reverse or monetarily recover, symbolic moral legal victory was immensely satisfying, validating, restorative of dignity, destroyed by monstrous family betrayal. I personally witnessed reading of condemnatory sentence in court packed with curious spectators, local journalists covering sensational case involving particularly shocking family fraud. Observing defeated, resigned expression of handcuffed Henry escorted by judicial officers being conducted directly to prison to immediately begin fulfilling judicially established prison sentence. Finally, feeling necessary emotional closure, official judicial validation of suffering trauma experienced during preceding devastating months. I didn't feel sadistic vindictive satisfaction observing his suffering, because true revenge doesn't reside in causing proportional pain, cruel retaliation, but rather in living well, prosperously, authentically rebuilding destroyed life brick by brick, demonstrating unbreakable resilience, transforming devastating adversity into shareable wisdom, potentially helping other similar victims navigating comparable traumatic situations. 5 years gradually transpired since that fateful traumatic day when I discovered at a hospital that Henry's terminal pancreatic cancer was completely fabricated, non-existent. 5 years of slow, painful, but ultimately successful transformative reconstruction of financial, emotional, psychological life destroyed by incomprehensible, monstrous family betrayal. During those 5 years, patiently, methodically rebuilding fragmented existence, I managed to disciplinedly save again, despite onerous payroll loans, substantially compromising monthly salary, prematurely partially settled bank debt, significantly reducing accumulated interest. Finally bought small modest's own apartment, again in affordable peripheral neighborhood, representing meritocratically reconquered financial independence after temporary patrimonial devastation. I initiated regular volunteering at non-governmental organizations specialized in supporting victims of family frauds, domestic economic violence, sharing personal story of overcome trauma to help other women, men traversing similar devastating situations. Feeling isolated, ashamed, impotent, offering practical orientation about available legal resources, healthy emotional coping strategies, instead of destructive denial or paralyzing resignation. I deeply reconnected with Rodrigo, rebuilding fraternal relationship, damaged during years of geographical emotional distancing caused by traumatic parental divorce and different choices made during vulnerable youth, discovering unexpected valuable solidary family support during difficult prolonged legal process and subsequent gradual emotional recovery. I partially reconciled with Marcia, finally retrospectively understanding, with maturity acquired through adversity, why she had divorced Henry decades ago after years tolerating his toxic manipulative behavior, sincerely apologizing for previous unjust judgments about her decision to end miserable marriage that I had naively criticized as paternal abandonment when I was immature teenager, incapable of understanding complexities of dysfunctional adult relationships. I sought intensive psychological therapy specialized in complex traumas, post-traumatic stress disorder, adequately processing conflicting, contradictory emotions about parental betrayal, justified anger against Henry for cruel, deliberate fraud, profound sadness for definitive loss of naively idealized father-daughter relationship, self-directed guilt for having been icily deceived despite multiple conveniently ignored warning signs, residual shame about publicly exposed vulnerability during mediatic criminal process. Therapists helped me deeply understand that fraud responsibility fell exclusively integrally on Henry as deliberate, calculating perpetrator, and that my natural filial trust wasn't pathetic, culpable naivety, but rather healthy, normal expression of unconditional family love that, unfortunately, was cynically, cruelly exploited by morally defective father incapable of adequately reciprocating genuinely offered generous feelings. I gradually, painfully, but necessarily learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, minimizing betrayal, gravity suffered, or reconciling irreparably broken relationship, but rather emotionally freeing myself from corrosive anger, consuming psychic energy, better invested in positive reconstruction, creation of authentic, meaningful life instead of remaining psychologically imprisoned in victim role permanently defined by experienced trauma. Henry remained incarcerated, progressively serving sentence during complete 5 years maximum period judicially established, without eligibility for semi-open regime progression or anticipatory conditional freedom due to only adequate but not exemplary, extraordinary prison behavior, minimally participating in available prison educational programs, modestly remunerated internal work. Occasionally, I received through Rodrigo, maintaining minimal sporadic contact with him, unofficial updates about his status. Physical health naturally deteriorating from accelerated aging, difficult, stressful prison conditions, almost complete social isolation without regular family visits, except Rodrigo occasionally, from minimal residual filial duty sense, despite accumulated justified resentments. Late apparently genuine repentance, repeatedly expressed through pathetic letters pleading impossible forgiveness, reconciliation, when Henry finally completed 5 years of effective imprisonment, being conditionally released under rigorous judicial supervision, including multiple movement restrictions, obligation of monthly appearance before conditional officer reporting developed activities. He unexpectedly telephoned me, requesting personal meeting to formally apologize face-to-face, trying to explain his actions' motivations. Initially, I terminally refused any direct contact because I felt no emotional need whatsoever for additional closure beyond that provided by successful criminal judicial process. But after consulting therapists and deeply reflecting during weeks, I finally agreed to meet him once in safe, neutral public location, accompanied by Rodrigo as protective witness, emotional support. We met at small, busy, centrally located city cafe. Safe public environment with multiple present witnesses, preventing any private emotional manipulation. Attempt psychological intimidation. Henry physically appearing aged decades beyond only 5 chronological years transpired since last time. I saw him being handcuffed, escorted from court after condemnatory sentence. Hair completely white now, sparse, revealing advanced baldness, defeated curved body posture, transmitting existential exhaustion of man, completely broken by accumulated consequences of systematically repeated destructive choices. Previously calculating eyes now extinguished, defeated, avoiding direct eye contact, transmitting genuine shame, or perhaps just psychological discomfort of guilty person face-to-face confronting victim. Beatriz, Rodrigo, I deeply thank you for agreeing to meet me despite everything I did, deservingly earning your eternal hatred, contempt. He hesitantly began with weak, trembling voice, hands visibly trembling, holding cup of cheap coffee rapidly cooling. I don't expect nor deserve forgiveness from you because crimes I committed against both cynically exploiting filial trust, family love for selfish personal benefit are morally inexcusable, unforgivable, regardless of attenuating circumstances, psychological justifications prison therapists tried helping me understand during years of forced imprisonment, obligatory reflection. I just wanted to look in your eyes, face to face, sincerely apologizing late, fully recognizing integral responsibility for devastating consequences of my actions on your lives. I coldly observed his pathetic apology request without emotionally demonstrating any compassion or consideration because years of intensive therapy had taught me that forgiveness was internal, personal process, not dependent on responsibility, recognition, or remorse demonstrated by perpetrator, and that offering premature, superficial forgiveness only from social pressure, family cultural expectations would be emotionally counterproductive, invalidating genuine experienced trauma. Henry, I appreciate late responsibility and recognition for crimes systematically committed against me and apparently also previously attempted against Rodrigo, as he subsequently revealed. But I'm not emotionally prepared nor personally interested in offering forgiveness and reconciliation at this moment, perhaps never futurely. I calmly, firmly responded with controlled voice devoid of apparent emotion. Criminal judicial process provided necessary closure validation for my emotional psychological recovery, and I don't additionally need family reconciliation or relationship maintenance with you to prosperously move forward. Building authentic, meaningful life free from your toxic, manipulative influence, I sincerely wish you find inner peace through genuine reflection, authentic behavioral change. But this journey is exclusively yours and doesn't involve my participation or expectation of family absolution, facilitating your psychological comfort at expense of my emotional well-being. Henry resignedly nodded, apparently accepting clearly, firmly established boundaries. Not trying to argue emotionally, persuade, manipulate, as he would characteristically do previous years, demonstrating perhaps genuinely some emotional maturity acquired through years of forced imprisonment, obligatory reflection, or perhaps just pragmatically recognizing futility of additional manipulative attempts against now empowered victim, establishing unbreakable, healthy boundaries. We said goodbye civilizedly, but definitively, without promises of future contacts or attempts to rebuild family relationship irreparably destroyed by systematic repeated betrayals. And I left Cafe feeling validated, strengthened by having firmly maintained appropriate boundaries. Instead of yielding to social cultural family pressures, expecting premature reconciliation, forgiveness, facilitating perpetrators, emotional comfort at expense of victims' psychological well-being. Today, at 42 years old with radically, wonderfully different life from existence I imagined at 37 when I naively signed bank transfer blindly trusting traitor father, I paradoxically recognized that his devastating betrayal, although extremely painful, was involuntary necessary catalyst, forcing transformative growth that would remain indefinitely dormant within mediocre comfort zone of naive blind trust and unquestionable parental authority. I don't thank for betrayal nor completely forgive his actions, but I serenely recognize that overcome adversity substantially strengthened character, clarified authentic values, taught profound lessons about human resilience, necessary discernment, healthy boundaries, establishment, intrinsic value independent from external family validation. I rebuilt life financially, emotionally, psychologically stronger, more resilient than before devastation because I painfully but effectively learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, but rather courage, that asking help isn't failure admission, but rather wisdom, that establishing boundaries isn't selfishness, but rather necessary self-care, that forgiving doesn't mean reconciling, but rather emotionally freeing oneself from corrosive anger, consuming energy better invested in positive growth. That fateful day when Henry called me dramatically crying, urgently asking $80,000 to pay non-existent oncological treatment, simultaneously marks devastating end of previous naive life and challenging beginning of consciously, deliberately, authentically reconstructed existence. He may have stolen money, destroyed filial trust, temporarily broken spirit, but ultimately completely failed at implicit objective of permanently, irreversibly destroying me. I was reborn stronger from ashes of his devastation like determined, resilient, triumphant phoenix. And this existential victory infinitely transcends any monetarily recovered value or judicially imposed prison sentence. Did you like Beatrice's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll wait for you.